Welcome to the January 1914 episode of my Blast from the Past. This month I'll be talking about the tango craze, hiking La Cumbre Peak, backdoor booze, and the storm of the century. Don't touch that dial. Dirty Dancing appeared in Santa Barbara this month, the tango. One society columnist in the local paper gushed, "No social season is complete without a fad, and this year the fad is the tango." The tango was clearly the hot dance in Santa Barbara back in 1914. But not everyone was taking to the tango back then. In Rome, for example, the Pope declared that the tango outrages modesty and added, "The people must be made to see the grave offense to God and the irreparable harm to society by participating in spectacles which incite looseness of morals." Well, if that weren't enough to make you sit out this fad, the Journal of the American Medical Association declared that elderly tango dancers are in danger of putting too great a strain on a dilated heart or an arteriosclerotic artery. While some people celebrated the new year by dancing the tango, others celebrated by taking to the trails. 1914 was the year that hiking earned its place as a fashionable activity in Santa Barbara. This new surge in hiking's popularity originated with a group known as the Hikers, who almost single-handedly propelled the sport to new heights. I talked to Dave Everett, author of the forthcoming book, Rediscovering the Trails of Mission Canyon. He told me that La Cumbre, above all others, was the peak which all trail users aspired to ascend. Atop this peak stood a large rock, referred to as La Cumbre Rock, which graced many a hiker's photograph. This rock became synonymous with the peak itself and would be immortalized over the years with a 30-foot flagpole placed in a ceremony in 1904 and a Masonic square and compass carved into the rock during another ceremony in 1909. Good luck finding this rock today, Everett told me. Most of the top of La Cumbre Rock was blasted away in 1923 when forest rangers used it as the foundation for the city's first fire lookout, leaving only a survey marker and the flagpole intact. The remainder of this rock, however, can still be found behind a communication building and a chain-link fence, standing guard over the city and pocked with plenty of reminders of its colorful past. Drinking alcohol just wasn't as much fun in 1914 as it had been the previous year. 2 new laws went into effect in January and tripped up a number of local tipplers. In downtown Santa Barbara, starting on January 9, swilling alcoholic beverages on the streets and alleys was no longer permitted. One paper wrote, "If the boys want to take a little sociable nip together, they'll have to hire a hall or find some secluded place where policemen never trod. Up to this time, they have used the alleys." Apparently, some saloons in Santa Barbara sold booze at the back door for those who preferred to drink their alcohol al fresco. But now, perpetrators would be fined $10 to $100 or sentenced to 1 to 10 days in jail. A beer distributor, possibly alarmed at how this new legislation could give alcohol a bad name, ran an ad in the Santa Barbara newspaper that advised, "Don't shy at beer as a beverage because some people misuse it. There is more genuine merit as a tonic, as a blood maker in a good beer than you may have supposed. One trial of a good beer will convince you. January 14 began with the tango and ended with the torrent that people talked about for years. Sunday afternoon and evening, January 25th, the skies opened up and deluged our city with 9.41 inches of rain. The paper wrote, "Houses carried away, bridges torn out, boulevards wrecked. 3 bridges along Mission Creek were carried out by the flood, and 2 bridges on the east side were destroyed. A number of houses along the creek were also floated away." Ocean waves swept over what is now Cabrillo Boulevard and carried away 3 sections of pavement, 75 to 150 feet long. The beach was covered with sodden belongings, furniture, and even wagons that had been swept along by the wall of water that roared down Mission Creek. Witnesses said it sounded like a freight train. But eventually the weather cleared. People started to clean up the debris, recount their experiences, and even laugh a little. The newspaper praised the telephone girls, young women who worked the switchboards. "A few words of praise may be given to the 30 telephone operators who worked incessantly for hours answering calls. Many of these girls, without hesitation, left their homes that were being flooded and worked until the rush was over. They did not take time to sit, but stood at the switchboard throughout the long and tedious grind." Ever ready to take advantage of some free special effects, the folks at the Flying A Film Company hastily wrote a script that featured a flood. In Oak Park, a cottonwood tree had fallen across the creek, and the movie's heroine was filmed making her way across it, being chased by a dastardly villain. Other residents thought that the flooding was just ducky. A man who raised chickens and ducks on Pueblo Street near Mission Creek lost many of his cluckers, but his web-footed fowl were just fine. The morning after the flood, he discovered a passel of mud-spattered paddlers looking like they had thoroughly enjoyed themselves. And when workers were moving a house that had floated off its foundation near Bath and Ortega Streets, they looked in the flooded foundation and saw 2 handsome specimens of mountain trout, measuring 7 and 8 inches long. Well, that's all for this episode of Blast from the Past for January 1914. Stay tuned for February, when you'll learn more about the storm of the century, a trained dog act, an unfortunate car accident, and, of all things, Ford tires and baby's teeth. You won't want to miss it.